Watch this.
Now what they're going to do is they're seeking judicial review.
Once again, Jerome County is looking closely at an election result. This time, how 2 voting errors could impact a 1-vote race.
I don't know who celebrates a draw, right? This isn't Major League Soccer.
Well, this political football match played out on social media and eventually in a courtroom. Nobody wins, but it might mean a winning bill coming out of the legislative session.
The unity we are witnessing is inspiring.
The chairwoman of Idaho's GOP responds to our party divided story from last week. Well, sort of. And she said some other things we wanted to ask her about. There's always a caveat given on election night. It's sometimes visible on the screen, which shows results. And those results, we tell you, are unofficial until they're certified. That certification is happening this week around Idaho. Even then, an election may not be quote-unquote over, since some places will have to have a runoff. Well, because one candidate didn't get the required number of votes to win. That'd be Eagle and Mountain Home. They're going to both have mayoral runoffs on December 5th because neither candidate got the 50% they needed. But there's another spot in Idaho waiting to see if they will need to hold a redo. Jerome County found that 2 voters were issued the wrong ballots absentee. Those 2 votes could swing the result of a local school board election, which came down to a 1-vote margin. And maybe you're thinking, Jerome County, again? Didn't they have election issues last year? Well, yes, they did. But as Joe Paris explains, there's a new law to address what happened in Jerome County this year, and it's being applied for the first time.
You've heard the elections tagline, every vote counts. Well, Jerome County is seeing that firsthand. In the Valley School District, the Zone 4 trustee election finished 48-47. And while examining the election results, the Jerome County clerk found that 2 voters, a couple that lives in the same house, they were incorrectly issued an absentee ballot for trustee Zone 5, but they actually live in Zone 4. And those 2 votes could totally change the election.
Now what they're going to do is they're seeking judicial review.
Idaho Secretary of State Phil McGrain is working with Jerome County and the courts to utilize a law passed in 2022, the Judicial Review of Election Results. It's a law that McGrain is very familiar with.
After some elections I went through at Ada County, we actually got this law passed to allow, rather than requiring a candidate to challenge an election or a voter to contest it, this allows the clerk to actually go to the court and just, as an open book, say, here's what happened, here's what took place. Can the court look at this and determine whether this mistake would have impacted the outcome of the election?
This is also the very first time the Judicial Review of Elections law is being used.
I was very active in getting this in place because we'd seen issues in the past where we wanted a court to look at our work and be able to review it, but there was no legal mechanism to do that other than someone contesting it. And so now this will actually be the first test of going before a judge, sharing all the information, allowing anybody who's been involved, so the candidates, any other interested party, to see what took place. And then I think likely in this case, we may be headed towards doing a new election.
So how will this all play out? McGrain says there are a lot of considerations.
That is still being figured out. I think one of the interesting things in this particular case is we do have 2 runoff elections coming up on December 5th, both in Eagle and in Mountain Home. I think there's an interest to try and align this. Now, there's a big question on whether this will go through the court proceeding fast enough to make that happen. But, with the holidays and everything else, we're trying to figure this out. I also think one of the determinations in this process is not just how close the election was or what happened during that process, but anytime you are asked to redo an election, there's no way to create the same circumstances. There's no way to get all the same voters to show up. So it's always going to be an imperfect solution to whatever came up. And I think that's one of the challenges the court will have to work out here as well.
Elections are human run, and that will leave room for human error. Catching mistakes, though, it shows an important part of the process.
I think being able to show some light on it, one of the greatest things of this review is we get to just let everybody see what's happening on the inside. And I think that's really important in terms of building trust in our elections. They are scrutinizing to such a level that they can make determinations like this. Like, of course, and I can assure you, the county wishes they'd just gotten it right the first time. I'm sure the candidates do as well. But we want to make sure that we do get it right, and so this gives a chance for them to try and make sure the record's corrected.
So this is the actual judicial review paperwork that I got this afternoon. I was just in touch with Michael Sieb, who's the deputy prosecutor for Jerome County, and he explained to me that Jerome County will simply be waiting to hear from a court to decide whether it feels it can decide on the matter simply with the information in this petition, or if a court will actually have to schedule some type of a hearing, get people together before a judge could make a decision. So, Brian, it's super interesting, and I found it very interesting for Phil McGray and a full circle moment.
Why can't they just have those two people vote again?
So it's very interesting. So in the Constitution, it is guaranteed that you have a secret ballot. So if they were to remove 2 votes and then have them re-vote, you would know who they voted for in the first election. So I actually asked the Secretary of State, I said, have you ever seen that movie where, you know, it comes down to 1 vote and there's a lost vote and one guy gets to decide the election? And he said, well, that couldn't happen in reality in Idaho because of the secret ballot. So there you go.
All right. Thanks, Joe.
I want Idaho to be a wonderful place for all of us. And this horrible, nasty behavior, it needs to end.
Well, if you spend any amount of time on Idaho's political social media pages, you might be familiar with that man, Greg Graff. He's a conservative activist and considers himself a political consultant, though his most notable branding might be through his years-long defamation battle playing out in real time, both online and now in a courtroom. Latter of which, well, that's come to a close. It's a complicated saga involving former State Representative Chad Christensen, Second Amendment Alliance founder Greg Pruitt, and former Idaho Freedom Foundation Vice President Dustin Hurst. So between a lawsuit and a countersuit, the judge made an anticlimactic decision to infer it's an impasse, which is why we need to bring in Andrew Bartline, who talked to both of these people on both sides of this lawsuit, who actually both support the same solution to frivolous litigation. That would be an anti-SLAPP law.
Yeah, if you're unfamiliar with that, SLAPP stands for Strategic Lawsuit Against Public Participation. Now, this type of lawsuit is meant to be a tool to stop someone from engaging in political conversation or action, not necessarily to hold them accountable for actual defamation. It's a tool to get in an opponent's way, often limiting their speech. And Idaho right now has no anti-SLAPP law, which would allow a defendant to call a SLAPP lawsuit into question and then motion for a judge to dismiss.
Idaho is increasingly part of a minority of states that don't have some statutory mechanism by which people can protect themselves from frivolous lawsuits that are clearly SLAPP. But again, you have to realize there are some legislators who don't think that that's the government's business. Let people hammer this out in civil proceedings. What we're doing here is trying to create legal mechanisms to deal with human problems. But certainly there are also individuals who do not want things said about them when they're, again, involved in the rough and tumble of politics, and will file a suit simply as a way to get other people to shut up. The anti-SLAPP mechanism is supposed to prevent the latter.
Interestingly enough, both sides of this specific lawsuit say their opponent filed a SLAPP lawsuit against them. And for background, we'll give you the spark notes. This all relates to a 2020 phone call between Greg Graff and then State Representative Chad Christensen's boss. Her name is Emily Robinson. She's named in this lawsuit as well. Graff told her that Christensen should not be trusted around women, that he has abused his position of power as a lawmaker. Graff even called him a, quote, sexual predator, among other allegations. Robinson recorded that call, and she shared it with Pruitt and Hurst, who then published that conversation online. Christensen then filed the first lawsuit, and he says Graff's words defamed him. Though as a public figure, Christensen has to prove malice and intent to harm in court, of which he did not.
Judge ruled in summary judgment in my favor. Chad Christensen's case was dismissed because it didn't have merit. As we all knew, right? It was a long shot at best on their part. The whole point, in my opinion, was to cause harm and to silence me.
Would you have considered that a SLAPP type lawsuit where an anti-SLAPP law would have helped you get out of this sooner rather than later?
Absolutely. If we had anti-SLAPP legislation, I would have utilized that probably instead of filing counterclaim the way I did. That would have been the strategy, and I believe I would have prevailed because of summary judgment.
So it's a win for Graff. Well, no, not really. His countersuit failed as well. He alleged Robinson, Christensen, Pruitt, and Hurst all organized an attack against himself. But the judge ruled that Graff, through his online actions, has also made himself a public figure, at least in a limited capacity relating to Christensen. And in response, Graff had dropped the case as he also sees the writing on the wall.
If we can extract lessons from this and improve public policy so bullies who want to use the legal system to silence their foes can't do this, that's a huge win for all of us. I don't know if Chad's lawsuit was valid or not. The judge didn't see merit for one reason or the other. I do know that Greg's was a waste of time. Is it going to change much about the way I tweet? No, absolutely not. Because I think somebody needs to say the things that a lot of people are thinking. And it was just a huge waste of time when it was all over mean tweets, man. It was all over mean tweets. Don't like my mean tweets? Okay, tweet something mean back at me or explain why my tweets are terrible. Don't sue people over stuff over speech you don't like. It's just a bad practice.
So who defamed who? Well, no one did. Both sides are quick to point to the other and claim their opposition or the opposing lawsuit holds no ground, which is an easy thing to say in hindsight given the judge's decision. But both sides say they support an anti-SLAPP legislation, which in theory could have nipped all this in the bud from the beginning and stopping this from happening, Brian, because as it is, the real winners here would be the lawyers pulling in money to defend and cast lawsuits for blog posts and mean tweets and defending those in court.
Yep, and meanwhile, the mean tweets, that battle's just going to continue on social media. So if it's in your algorithm, enjoy that. That'll be good. All right, thank you very much for explaining all that, Andrew. We'll see what happens this legislative session. How do you say it? Okay, so we're reviving our How Do You Say It segment today, which is usually reserved for helping us pronounce odd place names in Idaho. But we're pulling out the graphics today because of what was said in an Idaho GOP video released this afternoon. And we thought it was interesting considering the story we did last week on the divide within the state's majority party.
And let me tell you, the energy within our party has never been more aligned. The resonance of our message about fortifying conservative values in Idaho has been nothing short of extraordinary. The unity we are witnessing is inspiring. Witnessing the passion and commitment of Republicans across the state is a true testament to the strength of our party.
That is Idaho GOP Chairwoman Dorthy Moon, and maybe that is her response to our story and our request for an interview about it. I don't know, because she still hasn't responded to either request from us to talk about the divide within her own party. But before she got to the gaslighting part of that video, Chair Moon spoke about Idaho's Republican presidential caucus coming up on March 2nd. It was kind of a pep rally kind of speech about Idaho's impact in picking the Republican candidate for president next spring. And this is where the How Do You Say It segment comes into play because, well, Chair Moon explained it like this.
Being the fifth state in the nation to nominate our Republican presidential candidate brings Idaho to the forefront of national relevance. With our 32 delegates, that's more delegates than 22 other states, including Iowa.
Hold up. What was that?
With our 32 delegates, that's more delegates than 22 other states, including Iowa.
Chair Moon said this while showing a map showing all the delegates from each state. Okay, so here it shows Idaho with 32, all right, and Iowa with 40? Wait a second. When is 32 more than 40? It's not.
Idaho will be a significant voice in the race for the presidency.
Maybe it just has never been before, but okay, but what about our 32 delegates being more than 22 other states? Well, D.C., Guam, Puerto Rico, American Samoa, those aren't states. Idaho does have more delegates than 16 states, not 22.
Idaho will be a significant voice in the race for the presidency.
Sure, but we should probably figure out the significance of that significant voice first, no? And look, we all make mistakes. We get it. But when you have a graphic illustration of that mistake and you still just go with it, well, all right, to be fair, she did own up to it. We sent an email to Chair Moon to ask about their math. That was at 2:30 this afternoon. And then within 10 minutes, we got a response which said, oh, we meant to say early states like New Hampshire and Nevada, not Iowa. And then said they posted a correction on social media at 2:09 p.m., adding our 32 delegates is more than 22 other states and territories, including Puerto Rico, Guam, etc. So they didn't take the video down, by the way. It's still up. They just went with, well, what I meant to say was, so you can watch it for yourself, which is why we went with How Do You Say It segment. However, I'm sure no matter how many times you try to say New Hampshire or Nevada, Iowa doesn't just fall out of your mouth, does it? Maybe when you try to say Idaho, Iowa might fall out, maybe. But by the way, it's worth pointing out, we did get an almost immediate response to that question today from Chair Moon, which is great. But when I replied with another request for an interview concerning the divide within her party, well, we're still waiting for that response. There was a vigil last night for the 4 University of Idaho students who were murdered in their off-campus house a year ago yesterday. Hundreds of students gathered on campus to honor the lives of Madison Mogen, Kaylee Gonzalez, Xander Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin. They held a moment of silence. They also lit candles. There were speakers, 4 of them, one from each of the sorority and fraternity that each of that student represented and was part of. They lit candles again in remembrance of all 4 victims. Meanwhile, there was also a gathering at the U of I College of Law building in Boise. They held their own vigil to honor the victims. About 40 people showing up there, shining a light for the 4 students and taking a moment of silence there as well to remember. Although far from Moscow, the events of November 13th, 2022 still hit too close to home for many.
I remember when the news broke about it, and it was really hard to hear. I was thinking of all my friends up in Moscow, hoping that they were okay, praying for their safety, praying for the 4 students' families. I can't even imagine what they went through.
Coming up tonight on the news at 10, you're going to hear about Ethan Chapin from his family. Chapins are carrying on Ethan's legacy with the Ethan's Smile Foundation. Maggie O'Mara sat down with Stacy and Jim at the University of Idaho to talk about their son and how they're doing a year later. A lot of other things going on in the 208, some events you'll want to take note of. And Boise State women's sports, they're millionaires? Oh, what does that mean? Here's Morgan Romero to explain with the 411.
Right after the 208 at 5:30, there's a free virtual film screening of Hope Lives, Preventing Teen Suicide. Afterward, there'll be a discussion with a panel of experts to help further the conversation around suicide prevention in our community. You can see the Zoom link right now on your screen. You can also scan the QR code on your screen to register and share your questions for the panel. And remember, you can always text or call the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline at 988 if you or someone you know needs help. Boise State women's sports are millionaires, all thanks to an anonymous donor who gave a 7-figure donation. The Broncos are going to use it for projects that help Bronco women's sports like lights for the softball field. Currently, there are more than 200 female student athletes competing in 11 sports at Boise State. There's still time to donate to the Eagle Kiwanis Club's 18th annual turkey and food drive today. It's from now until 7 p.m. at the Eagle Albertson store. The goal? Collect 150 turkeys and lots of canned food that'll all go to the Eagle Food Bank. Although it's not even Thanksgiving yet, the Boise holiday tree is up and ready to go in the Grove Plaza. But don't worry, they are still respecting Turkey Day. The tree won't be lit until next Friday, the 24th, at 5 o'clock. The Ada County Highway District says the tree is from a home near Maple Grove and Fairview. And that's the 411 on the 208. I'm Morgan Romero.
Well, with Thanksgiving and Thanksgiving travel now just over a week away, I know everyone's attention turns to possible travel conditions for the holidays. So while it's a little too early to pinpoint exactly the details of the day, we can look at the general trend that we expect late next week. This is our 10-day temperature trend. I think tomorrow, by the way, is our last day in the 60s that we might see for a while, though I have said that once before this season, and Mother Nature proved me wrong. So we'll see what happens there. But generally, we will stay in those mid to low 50s, at least through the Thanksgiving holiday. We do see a cool down coming in Thanksgiving Day to Black Friday. I'm thinking this might be a little overdone on this particular model. I'm seeing a lot of models indicating upper 40s for Thanksgiving Day in Boise, and that cool down could be accompanied by a shot of precipitation as well. So we'll keep an eye on that, but that looks like the general trend for late next week. Today was another very comfortable autumn day. We hit the low 60s across most of the Magic and Treasure Valley, except out west towards Ontario, Nampa, Caldwell, just in the upper 50s. Evidence of that inversion. You can see that temperatures in Stanley and Haley were about as warm as Ontario and Nampa today. So right now we've had clouds that have started to stream in this afternoon. We started off nice and sunny. We'll end mostly cloudy. I think we'll stay mostly cloudy overnight. 56 right now with barely any wind out there in the Boise area. It looks like we are seeing a little bit of virga. This could be some sprinkles in eastern Oregon, but we are pretty dry in the lower levels of the atmosphere. So might see some clouds with those streaks coming out of the bottom. That is virga. It's precipitation that evaporates before it hits the ground. But we do have plenty of moisture being pumped our direction from this system off the coast of California. That combined with a cold front that will drop in to the south and to the east of us, or the north and the east of us, I should say, Wednesday, Thursday, could bring a little round of mountain snow to our central mountains. But generally, we will be dry for the next couple of days. Tomorrow morning, we'll dip down to the mid 30s across most of our lower elevations. We'll hit the low 60s in Boise. After that, you saw that temp trend mid 50s, but a lot more sunshine expected by the end of the work week. We have a another round of valley rain, mountain snow coming in on Sunday, and then conditions closer to normal early next week.
Let's get right to your comments. Darwin Roy sent this in, said he has a relative who's 85 years old. He's voted Republican since 1960. He was an officer in his county central committee when Dorthy Moon was elected. State chair, he said, well, they've taken over my party. He resigned from his position in his county because he couldn't stand the crazy talk. Obviously, he must be a rhino, he says. Dorthy Moon won't respond to the concerns about the Republican division because she's responsible for it, says Maggie in Twin Falls. Meanwhile, I hope Chairwoman Moon does an interview, says Deborah in Meridian. I'm a registered Republican, and this GOP divide is concerning. At least she didn't confuse Idaho with Ohio, because that happens pretty regularly. We are aware of that. The Republican Party in Idaho isn't just divided, it's fractured, says Scott, permanently. Bad for conservatives, good for Democrats. He thinks that's a sad note as of now. Brian, your disdain for Idaho's Republican Party is evident on every show. You're not fair and balanced, says Mike from Star. We do ask for comments from those that we are holding accountable. Sometimes we get them, a lot of times we don't. We do our best to be fair and balanced. We also do our best to, well, tell you the truth. We'll try to do that again tomorrow.